Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your break, that you're well hydrated, had some popcorn, or you brought some popcorn. What we intend to discuss in this one, we are looking at upgrading. And upgrading is a staple task. And by that I mean, it's a core task. It is necessary for any validator to upgrade their node. This is one of your core activities. So one of the quickest and simplest methods of upgrading is taking some downtime, switching off your node, and upgrading the binary. A more drawn-out approach involves using two servers and switching the session keys. I'll discuss that later. But this results in zero downtime. If you are not in the active set, this is a separate point, very important. If you're not in the active set, you have no fear of being slashed. Okay, so you need to know these events, know these scenarios, and be able to quickly execute your duties. So let's look at offline upgrade. Okay, and what I mean by this is just that you will be going offline to upgrade, so you will have some downtime. You may take a few minutes offline time to update your server and bring it back online. Using this approach, you have no fear of slashing if you are not in the active set. Within the 1KV, you can sustain 2% or approximately 200 minutes of offline time weekly without a penalty. You will, however, have a marginally lower weight within the nominator algorithm. And that's, if you recall, that weighting is 2. But if everyone is upgrading, then everyone will be taking some offline time. Or, well, most will be taking some offline time. This is reset on Sundays. So it's not a permanent thing or a monthly thing. It resets quite often. I think it's very fair to say that you can have 200 minutes of offline time before you are marked as ineligible or something like that, So it's not something that I fear in terms of going offline to upgrade, personally. Okay, so we look at offline upgrades again, but in the context of being in the active set. If you are in the active set, you need to consider some additional factors. You will be chilled, and that chill means like if you go on your stash and you hit stop, right? Your stash has no state as a nominator or validator. You will be chilled if you don't produce a block or an I'm online message within the session. Now that I'm online message is that little envelope that you see on your staking on the staking page. So I'll just call it envelope from now on. In the 1KV page, in the 1KV, you'll also receive a fault. So you get a fault if you are in the active set and for a session that you don't produce a block or the message, the envelope. It is important, even though I didn't list it here, a session is a subset of an era, and it's less time than an era. So in Kusama, it's 1 hour. So every hour a session passes, and I think within Polkadot it's 6 hours, or is it 4 hours? 4 hours, yeah, 4. So you have within that time frame to produce a block or that I'm online message. Collator based activity does not count to this metric. So even though you're a para validator, you have that purple symbol as represented now, and you gained 100 euro points. Now it means that you're online. I mean, no arguments there, but in context of the rules and in context of being chilled, it does not count. Okay, so I like to let that be abundantly clear. If you intend to execute an offline upgrade, you should attempt to do so if your node has produced a block or I'm online message in the session already. That is the best advice that I can give. So if you need to upgrade and you realize that, hey, I haven't produced either of these things and a new upgrade is available, you may wish to achieve one of these objectives so that you buy yourself a little more time. You never know what can happen in an upgrade, and if it is that you are doing an upgrade on a node that is in the active set, I recommend that you try the upgrade if you have a backup server or something like that on that server first, or if you have another server with a separate instance that is not in the active set, that you do that one first. So if there are any issues, if any issues arise, you have a backup. Okay, so we look at the simplest method to achieve this offline upgrade. And note the steps. The first is to download the binary. The second is to make it executable. And all these two steps have no effect on downtime. You're not taking your node offline. And the download might actually be the longest step of all of these here. So after you've made your binary executable, you stop the service, you move the binary across to the main directory, and you reload your daemon and you start the service. Now, I'm sure the pros can simplify this. Some may want to remove some steps. Some may... I've had some feedback from different persons in the who are very, very familiar with Linux, and they have views with regards to needing to stop the service or not. You can just do the daemon reload. But in my humble opinion, stick to these steps. They work, and I haven't had any issues with database corruption or any weird stuff. So for me, it works. And if you wish to simplify it in any way by using some ampersands and combining different steps, all up to you, right? But just keep the general gist of what is being done, and you should be fine. This takes less than a minute to execute. So if you're looking for like a time, that's about it. We're looking at seconds versus minutes. Now, alternatively, there's a group that says it's open source. You must build from the source. We don't want precompiled binaries, even though I personally think it's from a trusted source. But I think that some of these people they go by the philosophy, but they have no idea what the code has in it. So they can actually be downloading. Not that parity would do it, but if you're not looking over the code, then what's the big difference in using the precompiled binary from the same source? I leave. This is good talk for the comments, so criticize me if you disagree. This process of building from the source takes about 30 minutes depending on the resources of your computer. Very resource dependent. And it's very intensive in that your CPU utilization will go really high in general, and again, depending on your system. And if it is that you are doing this on a system that is actively validating for any reason, let's say you have another instance on the same machine, I do not recommend doing so. You don't want to affect your operations with this intense, process. So if you're not actively validating, and listen, I'm adamant that I must compile, and you have a good use case for it, and you're compiling, that's fine. But if you're actively validating, 30 minutes or more, you might actually miss the session. So I treat with care. And Secondly, you don't want to affect anything else that may be going on the same machine. So you know the facts, so treat it with care. The final point, if you are compiling, please look at the runtime notes, the release notes, my apologies. It indicates at times which version of Rust you should use. And there have been instances in which this needs to be in sync, even though you get a success on your compilation. Sometimes you may not, right? So treat this one with care as well. So there are other methods of upgrading. You have Ansible, you can use Docker, app update, and the like. If you are using any one of these approaches, ensure that your telemetry name is not altered. Always do that check. I keep saying it 100 times. You need to practice this. The only way you become efficient with these kind of things is to do it repeatedly, and you can find a test bed and for you to know what could happen. Consider upgrading on a backup node before updating on an active node. And monitor your nodes closely after the updates, and further to that, keep abreast of community feedback. It's not just upgrade, set it, forget it, leave. You need to actually upgrade, monitor, pay attention. Usually I use the concept that if nothing has changed, we should expect predictable results based on what we have had before. But when we introduce change, our expected output can also change. So this is why we do some monitoring. All right. There are auto updaters available, and I mentioned that before, and this is a fairly good resource, also developed by a member of the 1KV. Crypto Go Luna. Okay, so let's look at another upgrade approach, and this is the one in which you take no downtime. Another approach that can be used to upgrade a node without downtime is by using 2 server instances and switching the session key on your Stash account. Assuming that the current live server instance is called primary and the one that's not in the active set is called the secondary, the steps are as follows. Upgrade the secondary using any of the approaches mentioned prior. That would be like the copying the new binary, recompiling, or whatever the case may be. You upgrade your secondary server. Generate the session keys on this node. Apply the session key to the Stash account. Wait for the current session. And again, a session is not an era. A session is less than an era, a subset of. Wait for the current session to finish. Wait a further 2 sessions, full sessions, to elapse. At this point, the primary and secondary servers have now switched roles. Now, in the least, this takes 2 hours. If you are asked to do an upgrade immediately, right, you need to do the binary approach, or compile from source. Something you need to know the both approaches. It's not that this is how I upgrade and I'm not worrying about the other. You need to have familiarity with both approaches, because this approach is what you will use if you're switching physical servers. Another point to note is that when you are using 2 servers, the telemetry names should be the same. There is no restriction. The names need to be the same. Some people, they name their primary one name and they have their secondary as the other. Telemetry is only going to recognize one of your 2 names. So you better use the right one. Okay, so this final point is don't be a hero. And what tends to happen is that many of the pro system administrators attempt to develop these zero downtime disaster failover solutions. And in the scenario that I discussed before, where you have zero downtime, the cutover from one server to the other takes a while and requires both servers to be online. What some administrators or sysadmins want to do is that if the primary goes boom, instantly the secondary takes over. And what they do to achieve this is they copy the keys so that both servers are duplicates. And this has had negative, this is strongly discouraged, first of all, I've never seen someone say officially, yeah, you can give that a try. It is strongly discouraged. And if it is that this happens and you have two machines signing at the same time, you could get slashed heavily. You will get slashed more heavily using this approach than if you used if you were offline. So, if you are offline and you use this approach, if it is that you were offline and you weren't using this approach, then you will get a fault on the 1KV and you will get back into the active set next time, right? Your score, your ranking will be a bit lower, right, as we discussed in the nomination section, but you're still part of the 1KV. If you do this approach and both servers are on, meaning that you have a copy and both are on, you can be slashed for equivocation or double signing. And if you're slashed, you're out of the program. So for me, I don't take that risk at all. Okay? And I recommend that you don't do so as well. It came across my mind. I was thinking of ideas, but the risk is not worth it. Again, you're slashed, you're out. So think about that. Don't be a hero. Alright, so Linux skills. I call this the visual test. Right? Those who know what I'm referring to, you know. Right? You don't need to be a pro. Actually, my background, I have more Windows background server admin than I have Linux. But when I was in my younger days, I was a free BSD guy. And some of those skills have retained. And you can't, in this day and age, go without using some distro for reverse proxies or something. So while it's not my forte, it is something that I'm not estranged to. I would put it that way. Right? So don't be intimidated. You don't need to be a pro. Right? You can Google a lot of things once you know the right concepts. But what you need to do, you need to be a capable user and you need to be familiar with systemd, journalctl, the firewall system, right? So opening ports, closing ports, those sort of things. Basic networking tests, right? Checking IPs, making sure there's ingress and egress of traffic and the like. All tasks related to rollout, upgrading of your node. So you need to know how, under disaster situations, how to spin up a node quickly. In some of my previous videos, once you have that shell, you can get up and running in about an hour using a snapshot. Less than an hour. And you need to be able to monitor. And I hope to cover that later on. You need to keep abreast on your server. Alright, so let's look at rewards, and I will go into the first calculation with some detail, and the second one we will just fast forward. So Kusama, we are looking at an average reward per era of 575 KSM for all the validators. So we divide by 900 and we get 0.64 KSM per era for a validator. Now there are 4 in Kusama, 4 eras for a day. At 10% commission, you will earn 0.064 KSM, and including your self-stake, I won't go into those details, you will earn an additional 0.005. So that gives you 0.069 KSM per era on average. In my experience, the number is closer to 0.065. And since you will be nominated for 4 eras, when you are nominated for 4 eras, and you are nominated once per week. So we do 4 by 4. That'll give you the month, and we multiply it by 0.065, and we get 1.04 KSM per month. Okay, so I mean, if I botch that, you can just take a look at this slide and figure things out yourself. So for Polkadot, we are just going to fast forward a bit. You get 877 DOT per validator. At 3% commission, you get 26.31. I'm just going down to the total. That'll be 28.24 DOT per era, right? And an era is a day. If you are nominated for 6 eras or 6 days, you'll be nominated once per 6 days. My apologies. So that'll be times 5, and we get 141 DOT per month. Okay, so again, if I botched it, you can just read it over and get a gist. But just looking at the last line, which I'm sure is correct, 1.04 KSM per month and about 141 DOT per month. Now, as more entrants on board, these numbers are going to get lower because the rotations get longer. Okay, so this is something you need to note. And with that, I conclude with a resource page. It has a lot of good resources out there. Chris, a 1KV member, has a good repository, and the URL is listed. Polkadot, again, another 1KV member, he has a good wiki resource, unofficial. The first two are unofficial. Kusama's tip board, you can take a look. There are a lot of tools, a lot of good content, and I must say a lot from the 1KV candidates. And the last two are the official resources, one dealing with the validator in general and the 1KV in general as well. So with that, I close, and I hope this has helped you in some way or the other to answer some questions. And if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us on Riot. I bid you adieu and have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.